As Neptune slipped into the Earth sign Virgo, the biggest stock market crash in history replaced the optimistic extravagances of the Neptune in Leo era with the thrifty cares of the Great Depression,
I was building a dream.
placing emphasis on Virgo day-to-day things like employment and serving those in need,
When there was earth to plow or guns to bear arms,
with welfare and social services taking the stage. Breadlines and soup kitchens were run by a plethora of charities.
they used to tell me I was building a dream with peace and glory ahead.
But in 1933, with Neptune conjunct Jupiter and Pluto square Uranus, prohibition finally ends, creating spontaneous street celebrations.
For bread. Once I built a
This same powerful planetary combination brought great changes globally in technology and politics.
race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime? Once I built a tower up to the sun, brick and rivet and lime. Once I built a tower, now it's done.
With the Neptunian mystery of the Lindenberg kidnapping dominating the media as the crime of the century,
Gee, we look swell.
although in true Neptunian form a fog of doubt has been cast over the guilt of the man sentenced to death for the crime, and the overreaching influence of the rich and powerful Lindenberg.
With a drum, say, don't you remember? They call
A reminder of the plutonic influence of the era.
all the time.
This time also marked the first storms that turned America's Great Plains into the Dust Bowl due to massive soil erosion from poor farming techniques. With dissolving Neptune in the Earth sign, governments were forced to face soil conservation.
Once in khaki suits, ah gee, we look swell, full of that Yankee doodly-dum. 500,000 boots went slogging through hell, and I was a kid.
While Neptune in Virgo was trine his natal value system Venus in wealth-oriented Taurus, economist John Maynard Keynes came to prominence with what was considered a revolutionary idea in economics.
Hey, don't you remember?
With Neptune still at 0 degrees in scientific Virgo, penicillin is discovered, transforming modern medicine. In an era fueled by an obsessive belief in chemistry, traditional organic farming was all but wiped out. Scientific Virgo hailed in the Green Revolution, bringing arsenic and DDT to farming. Marveled as miracle products in the war against nature. Scientific Virgo's attempt to deal with mental illness moved into the use of lobotomies, seen at the time as a legitimate alternative for mental health. Virgo's analytical emphasis empowered Freudian psychoanalysts to create the first business focus group, as well as the mercurial debut of cognitive science, and a host of rational theories like game theory, a mathematical theory on decision-making that would heavily influence the following era. The principle of the modern computer arrives, and the first cyber stirrings in Silicon Valley with the founding of Hewlett-Packard. Technological Virgo embodied massive engineering feats during the era, as well as social engineering with Roosevelt's new economic deal in the US, Nazi Germany's frightening obsession with Virgoan purity, and the terrorizing Great Purge in the Soviet Union. The highly Virgoan technocrats movement believes scientists and engineers should run the country, not politicians. Even the 1920s individualists, the kindred of the Kibo Kif, transformed during Neptune in Virgo into the militant green shirts political reform movement. And ushering in the sensitive Pisces polarity came Dr. Bach's flower essences and Joseph Ryan's parapsychology, with the release of his highly successful 1934 book coining the phrase extrasensory perception. In 1935, as Saturn opposed Neptune, the Pisces polarity is ushered in via the ecosystem theory of complex interrelationships. During the same opposition with Saturn in cosmic Pisces, Alice Bailey publishes her treatise on the seven rays, ushering a new interest in esoteric astrology. Utilizing the mercurial format of radio, Evangeline Adams' hugely successful astrology radio show makes her a household name, and in a first of its kind with the Sun and Moon conjunct Neptune, the first sun sign astrology column is published in the UK. By the end of the era, it would be a popular global phenomena. With Neptune in mercurial Virgo, astrology became quite analytical, with the unparalleled statistical analysis of stock market astrology and groundbreaking technical works like Reinhold Ebertein's midpoint astrology. This was also the time of Dane Rudger, another born during the profound 1890s Neptune-Pluto conjunction. He aptly, for Pluto, promoted a more psychological approach to astrology.
Sweet Leilani, heavenly flower.
Synchronous with the development of the atomic bomb, the rise of fascism and the mafia, Pluto is discovered in 1930. Paving the way for World War II during the early 1930s, Pluto in home and country Cancer square Uranus in warlike Aries brings to an era of Virgoan doubt and uncertainty the rise of authoritarian leaders and changing global alliances. With underworld Pluto in aspect to renegade Uranus, this period was also known as the Public Enemy era, with mafia boss Al Capone's trial tantalizing the media and a whole host of outlaw bank robbers charming much public sympathy with their anti-big bank stance.
Paradise completed. Oh, lovely Leilani, you are my dream come true. Paradise completed. Oh, lovely Leilani.
In the era of Pluto's discovery, Henry Ford developed a plutonic mafia-style control over workers. Not tolerating any defiance, he famously sped up the assembly line to intolerable speeds, shot and killed protesting workers in complicit support from police, blaming it on the unions.
There's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather, since my man and I ain't
At the beginning of Neptune in Virgo, Britain controlled 1/4 of the world, but as Neptune in Virgo opposed England's natal Pluto in Pisces, 2 centuries of colonial expansion went into decline.
There, gloom and misery everywhere, stormy weather, just can't get my poor self together. I'm weary all the time, so weary all the time. When he went away, the blues walked in and met me. If he stays away, old rocking chair will get me. All I do is pray the Lord above will let me walk in the sun once more. Can't go on. All I have in life is gone. Stormy weather. Since my man and I ain't together, keeps raining all the time, keeps raining all the time. I walk around heavy-hearted and sad. Night comes around and I'm still feeling bad. Rain pouring down, blinding every...
Known as the White House coup or the business plot, a group of Wall Street financiers plotted a coup to overthrow the Roosevelt government and implement a Hitler-inspired fascist regime. With the coup predominantly led by members of the DuPont and JP Morgan cartels, with other Nazi-sympathizing US banks involved.
All I have in life is gone, stormy weather. Since my man and I ain't together.
Beginning in 1935, the long transit of Pluto opposing the US natal Pluto in the monetary second house, where the Latin phrase meaning New Order of the Ages was added to the US $1 bill. The duplicity of Pluto opposite the US natal Pluto at the onset of World War II had the government opposed to Nazi Germany, while several major American corporations were given special permits to continue supplying both Nazi Germany and the Allies for considerable profit.
That way. I can't help it. Men cluster to me like moths.
With American banks assisting in moving funds through neutral Switzerland and fascist Spain. With prominent men like Henry Ford and Lindenberg publicly supporting Hitler, who was Time magazine's Man of the Year in 1938. The Pluto opposition to the USA's monetary Pluto was a lucrative arrangement. While much of Europe and Asia was devastated by the end of the war, the US held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves, 3/4 of its invested capital, and was producing 50% of the world's goods and services. By cosmic coincidence, this was also the US's Neptune return, with the US at this time creating 12 different organizations to do perception management, using media to shape and align people's views to that of the government.
Men cluster to me.
With the introduction of various international radio propaganda networks like Voice of America, promoting soft power and cultural propaganda.
I know I'm not so
With the US's imaginative and somewhat patriotic Neptune return, the introduction of superheroes dominated, and a revised version of God Bless America topped the charts. Gone with the Wind represented a southern white version of the American dream and becomes the biggest selling film of all time. During this auspicious time, the World Fair in New York City opens with a series of trines to the US Neptune return and futuristic Uranus in monetary Taurus. theme for the fair was Futurama, displaying a futuristic city and futuristic cars, but in fact this was another propaganda heist by a master of mass persuasion, Edward Bernays, who named the futuristic city Democracy and was backed by corporate investment to promote the idea that capitalism and democracy were inseparable. In a reaction to the social engineering of Roosevelt's New Deal, which they deemed communist. Literature of the era reflected the growing Virgo cynicism and disillusionment. Romantic cliches were abandoned for extreme realism or complex symbolism. Language grew so frank there were bitter censorship battles. With technology dominating the Neptune-Virgo period, phenomenal advancements in microphones and recording format from acoustic to electric meant a singer no longer had to yell to be recorded, affording a new softer style of vocal.
Empty pockets don't ever make the grade. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, that's got his own.
Technological Neptune in Virgo expanded the possibilities of electronic music, with Lithuanian virtuoso Clara Rockmore popularizing the theremin. While Neptune was opposing her Pisces sun, she played sold-out performances across Europe and America. And the ever-popular all-electronic Hammond organ arrived in 1935 while Saturn and Neptune were in opposition. But it was the sound of swing that took over. As the popularity of jazz waned, swing became the new dominant dance music. With Virgo's love of complexity, ensembles were typically large, following a syncopated rhythm, often with erratic tempos and frenetic dancing.
I'm mistaken, here comes something now.
Neptune and the self-aware Earth sign also brought the Delta blues and folk into prominence, both socially aware styles steeped in the realism of the Great Depression, with Neptune in Virgo's trademark critical eye on day-to-day life. In the era of Pluto's discovery, many artists of the day were born during the phenomenal Neptune-Pluto conjunction of the 1890s, including early hillbilly artists now renamed country and western, like the Carter family, that transformed country from an isolated regional sound to a nationally recognized and popular musical style.
Oh, I'll whine with my mangles and waving black hair, with the roses so red and the lilies so fair.
Ida red, I'm plumb full about Ida red.
Symbolic of Pluto square Uranus, Gloomy Sunday was reported to have inspired a series of suicides. Also at this time was the finely tuned and meticulous Virgoan choreography of synchronized swimming. Film was creating a positive escape from the drearies of the Depression. The uncertainty of the era resulted in widespread popularity of fantastical escapist fare, moving more into Virgo's Pisces polarity. Swashbuckling adventures and the safe scares of horror films were highly successful, as was Hollywood's magical world of musicals, painting familiar scenes of depression-stricken cities with Hollywood's new happy ending formula. Nonetheless, critical Virgo's social commentary was ever present.
Somebody will listen to me.
Naturally, the era of sound greatly changed Hollywood's approach to storytelling. With Neptune in mercurial Virgo, more dependence was on dialogue, and in a full Mercury meltdown, Hollywood remade multiple versions of their English language films into various other languages to recoup their international losses.
La sangre de Drácula corre ya por las venas de la señorita Seward.
Although an era of economic hardship, the film industry was highly successful.
Skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true.
With Virgo's self-analysis and technical brilliance, the pessimistic view of the spiritually failed man in Citizen Kane became an instant classic.
Let me see your underwear.
With a discriminating Neptune in Virgo, the Hays Code was introduced in 1930, a list of topics no longer allowed in Hollywood. The censorship included sympathy for gays or criminals, men and women in bed together, the use of drugs, and so on. In fashion, with Neptune in modest Virgo, hemlines dropped and previously provocative knees were covered. The tall, slender, elegant silhouette became the Neptune in Virgo ideal. The playful gender swap of 1920s suits was replaced by the fine, tailored, formal variety. This was the beginning of the ready-to-wear fashion age. With media's continued expansion, fashion was now far-reaching.
You should remember that you were born to die.
And with financial hardships, cheaper bulk-made clothes and inexpensive synthetics made substantial profits at this time. Ready-to-wear also sparked new interest in Virgo's domain of health, beauty, and diet as clothing became set-specific. Ready-made also accustomed society to standardized sizes. Women of larger sizes had difficulty finding apparel.
Play it now for me. I'll do it Auburn Avenue, gal.
Neptune in Virgo's focus on health created the Keep Fit movement, with community groups and workplaces promoting exercise routines.
I'm home this morning.
While in the previous Neptune Leo period, the West's interest in yoga focused on self-realization, now in fitness-friendly Virgo, health issues bring yoga to Yale University and make Krishnamurti an international celebrity. Pierre Bernard, known as the Great Om, being credited as the first to bring tantric techniques to the West. During Neptune in cynical Virgo, he introduced his non-spiritual version of Hatha Yoga to America, although due to his scandalous reputation, helped foment yoga's reputation as a salacious and cultish pursuit.
You should remember that you were born to die.
In 1933, with Pluto conjunct the Catholic Church's natal Neptune-Uranus conjunction, Pope Pius XII signs a treaty with Nazi Germany and the Vatican. Although the Church claims this limited the damage to genuinely oppressed Catholics in Nazi Germany, it may well also be argued this treaty contributed to a decrease in the previously vocal criticism of Nazism by the hierarchy of the Church. This is also the time of the Catholic Church in Haiti's first of several attempts to eclipse and decredit the vastly more popular Haitian voodoo. Pluto conjunct the Catholic Church's natal Uranus-Neptune also created much radical activism, like the work of Dorothy Day, a Christian activist, creating the socialist Catholic worker movement, with a pacifist agenda for economic reform, creating communal farms to help feed the poor.
I got the blues so bad until it hurt my down to soul. I got the blues so bad until it. I represent to you God in person.
With the likelihood the birth of Islam being the Saturn-Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Virgo of November 625. In the era of its Neptune return in scientific Virgo, the Nation of Islam is formed, with its belief that white people were created by an evil scientist.
White people are not your brother. They're not your blood in your flesh. I got up this morning, feeling up for my
Also at this time, owing much to Virgo's polarity of inclusive Pisces, the I Am movement, accepting no money and believing in the channeling of ascendant masters.
I woke up this morning, just found your break all day. I got up this morning, just found your break all day. I look in the pool around my good guy, you darling. And I start to walking. I'm gonna walk from sun to sun.
Statistic-loving Neptune in Virgo created the Gallup poll in 1935, which was immediately incorporated into politics and consumer analysis. Copyright had existed to some degree since the 1800s, but it wasn't until the 1930s with fastidious Neptune in Virgo that such legal avenues began to be explored. The growing ranks of lawyers in the 1930s were now more equipped for copyright litigation, with the fashion industry creating its own version. The generation born at this time are known as the silent generation due to the outer planets or being in passive signs with a tendency to be shy and conservative. Their Pluto stamp in Cancer also breeds a strong loyalty to one's own social group, often via nationalism. In art, the clearly Virgo social realism movement was drawing attention to everyday conditions in the life of the working class. As well as the birth of the politically edged mural movement. With the Pisces polarity influencing magical realism and various esoteric and surreal styles. Known as the Picasso of dance, Martha Graham focused on the nature of depression and isolation. Utilizing a Neptune in Virgo self-analysis expression of her profound natal Neptune-Pluto conjunction. With Saturn opposite Neptune, cannabis was criminalized. The popular drug of musicians, bohemians, and ethnic minorities suffered a right-wing media attack disguising the blatant racism behind the law and the behind-the-scenes lobbying of the cotton and newly created nylon industry. Amphetamines, on the other hand, became incredibly popular.
Give me another one of those headache powders. Headache powders? Oh, you poor sap. Hasn't it tumbled yet? Those headache powders are dope. Dope? You mean I've been taking dope? Yeah, dope. Cocaine. The kids catch us.
Marketed under the name Benzedrine and sold over the counter legally, most used by truck drivers, athletes, and students, as well as several famous authors of the time, who referred to the drugs as pet pills. It was clearly a Virgo-oriented work drug. The rise of the mafia in the era of Pluto also kept heroin very much underground but available.
If you don't believe cocaine is good, there's Alamo Rose and Cedar Woods. Hey, hey, gonna take a whip on me.
Neptunian in its all-sacrificing love affair, and for the conspiratorial behind-the-scenes manipulation in the era of Pluto, King Edward VIII's abdication of the English throne in 1936 during Neptune opposite Saturn was a power battle between modernism and the prevailing conservative establishment. The popular king's love affair with the American twice-divorced Wallis Simpson broke all the rules for a head of the Church of England that did not recognize marrying divorcees at the time. But his choice was supported by the people with a polarized battle between the modernist and conservative media.
The king should marry who he loves.
I think the king should marry the woman he loves.
with his and Mrs. Simpson both having Aquarius ascendants with little regard for the pomp and ceremony of monarchy. His conservative younger brother was much preferred. With Edward's regal Neptune Jupiter conjunct Mrs. Simpson's powerful stellium of planets, including an entrancing Neptune Venus Pluto conjunction, it seems a sacrificial love affair was unavoidable. With the Neptune in Virgo era also being the era of Pluto's discovery. As we move into the next era, Pluto moves into a sextile with Neptune that will continue due to Pluto's current high speeds until the 2030s. Last time Pluto and Neptune were in aspect was the conjunction of the 1890s, a time of unparalleled industrial expansion and cultural change. The rise of controlling monopolies and plutocrats, and the rise of unions to counteract the dominance of big business. Where for the first time national and international factors were as important to the average person as local conditions. Pluto aspecting Neptune suggests our own individual pursuit to personal truth is both transformational for us and the collective, as we see the development of subcultures and profound individualism since these planets have gone into sextile, suggesting a new era of shifting planetary relationships, collective transformation through profound connection, in a gradual yet powerful movement of human evolution.